The rain hammered against the glass windows of the towering Morgantech building, streaking the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold and gray. Inside, the tension was electric. Hundreds of computer screens flickered uselessly, the hum of servers had died, and the heart of the billion-dollar empire had gone still. The CEO, Daniel Morgan, stood frozen before the dark monitors in the command room, his reflection ghostly in the glass wall. Just an hour ago, his company had been preparing to launch a new global financial platform that would revolutionize digital banking. Now, the entire system had crashed. Billions of dollars in investments were frozen. Partner companies were calling. Investors were panicking. The world was watching Morgantech fail in real time. Daniel's blue eyes were bloodshot from 48 hours without sleep. He had poured everything into this launch, years of innovation, endless meetings, sleepless nights, and a reputation he had built from the ground up. He was the face of success, the man who could solve anything. But tonight, for the first time in his life, he couldn't. "Sir, we're trying to reboot the servers manually," said Brian, the lead systems engineer, his voice trembling. "But, it's bad. We're locked out of the root directory. It's like the system's eating itself. Every backup is corrupt." Daniel rubbed a hand across his face, staring at the floor. "How long?" "We don't know. Maybe hours. Maybe days." Daniel turned to the window again. The city stretched beneath him like a field of broken stars. He had worked his entire life for this company. It wasn't just his legacy, it was his promise to his late father, the man who had built Morgantech from a small garage dream. Losing it wasn't an option. Yet here he stood, watching it crumble in the span of minutes. He slammed his fist against the desk. "No. I don't care what it takes, fix it. Call everyone. Do whatever you have to." His voice echoed through the glass walls. Engineers scrambled like frightened birds. Phones rang. Voices clashed. The clock ticked toward midnight. The news outlets were already publishing headlines: Morgantech system crash threatens global launch. Outside the command room, the quiet hum of the cleaning crew began. It was past midnight, the time when the powerful slept, and the invisible people worked. Among them was Rosa Bennett, the company's night maid. She had worked at Morgantech for 6 years, invisible to the men in suits who passed her daily. She never complained, never spoke much, and always smiled politely. Her hands, rough from years of labor, moved gently across the polished floors, her mind far away, thinking of her son, Jamal, waiting for her at home. He was 16 now, curious and bright, with eyes full of fire. Rosa worked nights to pay his school fees and dreamed of him becoming something more than she ever could. She didn't know much about computers, but Jamal did. In fact, he was obsessed with them. Rosa often caught him taking apart old laptops from recycling bins, fixing them, and giving them to neighbors who couldn't afford one. She would scold him for staying up late, but secretly, she was proud. Tonight, however, Rosa was worried. Jamal had been sick for days, coughing and too weak to eat. The bills were piling up, and her heart carried a quiet storm of fear. As she cleaned the CEO's floor, she noticed the chaos: people shouting, screens black, lights flickering. Daniel Morgan stood by the window, a shadow of despair. She paused, clutching her mop, and quietly said, "Sir, excuse me." Daniel turned sharply, not used to being spoken to by anyone from the night staff. His expression softened when he saw her trembling hands. "What is it?" he asked, trying to sound patient. "I don't mean to bother you," she said softly, "but, is everything okay?" He almost laughed, a sound that came out broken. "No, it's not okay. The system crashed. Years of work, gone. We're trying to fix it, but no one knows how." Rosa hesitated. She had heard Jamal talk about computers and systems so often that some of his words stuck in her mind. "My son, he knows computers. He fixes them sometimes for people around our neighborhood." Daniel blinked, surprised she was even suggesting it. "Your son?" "Yes, sir," she said nervously. "He's very smart. I know it's not my place, but maybe he could help, just look." One of the engineers overheard and scoffed. "Ma'am, this isn't a phone or a game console. We're talking about a multi-tier encrypted financial database." No offense, but a kid from the street can't. Daniel held up a hand. That's enough, Brian. He turned back to Rosa, his tired mind torn between logic and desperation. It was absurd, but so was his situation. What's his name? Jamal, sir. Where is he now? At home. Just a few blocks away. I can call him. Daniel stared at the dead monitors, then back at her. What did he have left to lose? Call him, he said quietly. Bring him here. Rosa's eyes widened. Now. Now. Within 20 minutes, a skinny boy in an oversized hoodie walked into the gleaming building, escorted by his mother. Security guards gave curious looks as Rosa led him past the glass elevators and into the heart of Morgan Tech. Jamal's eyes darted everywhere, at the massive screens, the glowing servers, and the people in panic. Mama, are you sure I can be here? The boss said so, she whispered, touching his shoulder. Daniel turned when they entered. He saw a boy, nervous but alert, eyes sharp like a blade. You're Rosa's son. Jamal nodded shyly. Yes, sir. You know computers? A bit, sir, Jamal said, his voice soft but steady. Mostly hardware and code stuff. I help my teachers fix school laptops. Brian muttered under his breath, we're really letting a kid try this. Daniel ignored him. The system's dead, he said, motioning to the main console. Can you take a look? Jamal stepped forward slowly. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The engineers watched in disbelief as he began to navigate the system, first cautiously, then with growing confidence. Who's been running these scripts? He asked quietly after a moment. Brian frowned. Our security protocol. Why? Jamal tilted his head. They're conflicting with the core. It's like, your firewall's fighting your backup. Daniel blinked. In English, son. Your system's protecting itself from itself, Jamal said. That's why it keeps crashing. The room went silent. Daniel leaned forward, watching as the boy typed furiously. The monitors flickered, lines of code flying across the screen. He's in the core directory, Brian whispered. How the hell did he? Jamal's fingers moved faster. Rosa stood behind him, wringing her hands, praying silently. Minutes felt like hours. Then, the monitors blinked back to life. The Morgan Tech logo appeared. The system rebooted. The engineers gasped. Daniel's mouth fell open. What did you just do? Jamal looked up shyly. Just rerouted the conflict and restarted the security route from the shadow copy. It wasn't gone, just hiding. The room erupted. Phones rang again, but this time with good news. Servers online, someone shouted. Mainframe responding. Data restored. Daniel stared at the boy in awe. The room that had been filled with despair was now buzzing with life again. Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she watched her son, her little boy who used to fix broken radios, save $1 billion company. Daniel slowly walked over and put a hand on Jamal's shoulder. You just did what a team of world-class engineers couldn't, he said quietly. How did you learn all that? Jamal shrugged. YouTube. Old books. I just like figuring out how things talk to each other. Daniel chuckled in disbelief. For the first time that night, he smiled. A genuine, grateful smile. Well, Jamal, he said softly, you just saved Morgan Tech. Rosa stood speechless, tears streaming down her face. The boy smiled shyly, glancing back at her. The CEO of one of the biggest companies in the country was looking at a janitor's son like he was the most important person in the room. And he was. As the monitors glowed and the tension faded, Daniel looked out the window again, this time not at a city falling apart, but one being reborn. He realized something he had forgotten long ago: genius has no title, no wealth, no pedigree. Sometimes, it comes from places the world refuses to look. The morning sun poured through the towering windows of Morgan Tech, spilling gold over glass tables and silver walls. The company that had been on the verge of collapse just hours ago was now alive again, systems restored, data secure, and the global launch back on track. But inside Daniel Morgan's chest, something else had awakened. He hadn't slept all night, yet his mind was more alive than ever. He kept replaying that moment, the boy's calm hands typing like he'd been born for it, the way the impossible had turned possible in front of hundreds of stunned professionals. Jamal Bennett. A name Daniel couldn't get out of his head. Rosa stood outside his office that morning, her uniform crisp but her hands trembling. She hadn't expected to be called up again, especially not to the CEO's floor. When his assistant led her in, Daniel stood by the window, gazing over the skyline. He turned when he heard the door. "Rosa," he said, his voice softer than before. "Please, come in." She nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. I just wanted to thank you for letting Jamal help last night. He didn't sleep, but he kept talking about how much he learned from seeing everything." Daniel smiled faintly. "I should be the one thanking him. He saved the company. Literally." He gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit." Rosa hesitated but obeyed. It was the first time she had ever sat in that office. Everything gleamed, marble, glass, and power. Daniel looked at her, seeing her not just as the woman who mopped the floors but as a mother who had raised something extraordinary. "Rosa," he began, "you said Jamal likes computers." She nodded quickly. "He loves them, sir. I can't afford fancy things, but he finds old parts, fixes them. He even helps kids in the neighborhood learn. Sometimes he talks about code like it's magic." Daniel chuckled softly. Magic is the right word. Then his expression grew serious. "I want to meet him again, properly this time. Would that be all right?" Rosa blinked, stunned. "Of course, sir." That afternoon, Jamal returned, this time through the front entrance, escorted by the same security guards who had looked down on him the night before. But now, they nodded respectfully. He wore the same hoodie, a little washed out but clean. His eyes were bright, curious. Daniel met him in the innovation lab, a sleek, futuristic room filled with equipment and holographic screens. "Hey, Jamal," Daniel greeted. "Good to see you again." "Hi, sir," Jamal said politely. "I didn't think you'd want to see me after last night." Daniel smiled. "You kidding? You're a legend around here. The team's still talking about you." Jamal looked down, embarrassed. "I just helped a bit." "You didn't just help," Daniel said. "You fixed what a dozen professionals couldn't." He studied the boy for a moment. "Tell me, how'd you learn all that?" "No formal training, right?" Jamal shook his head. "No, sir. I just like understanding how systems think. It's like people, you can't fix what you don't listen to." Daniel was silent. Those words hit him harder than he expected. You can't fix what you don't listen to. He realized how often he'd stopped listening, to his employees, to himself, to life outside his penthouse world. He smiled softly. "Jamal, how would you like to come here again, not as a visitor, but as part of the team?" Jamal's eyes widened. "You mean, a job?" Daniel nodded. "An internship. Paid, of course. You'd learn from our best engineers, and they'd learn a few things from you too." Rosa gasped when she heard it. "Oh, sir, that's too much." "No," Daniel said firmly. "It's the least I can do. Talent like his deserves to be nurtured." For the first time, Rosa didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt that all those years of mopping floors and carrying worries in silence had led to this moment, her son being recognized for his brilliance. The weeks that followed changed everything. Jamal's presence at Morgantech became the talk of the building. The kid everyone had dismissed as the Maid's boy was now sitting in meetings with engineers, drawing diagrams on whiteboards, and offering solutions that stunned senior developers. His mind worked differently, fast, intuitive, creative. Daniel would often stand by the door just to watch him. But not everyone was happy. Brian, the senior systems engineer, felt humiliated. "We're seriously taking coding lessons from a kid with no degree," he muttered one afternoon. "It's a circus." Daniel overheard him and walked over. "Brian, remember the night you said that kid from the street couldn't fix our system?" Brian swallowed hard. "Well," Daniel continued, "that kid saved your job. And mine. Maybe it's time you learned humility along with code." Brian said nothing. He turned away, his face flushed. That night, as the office quieted, Daniel invited Rosa and Jamal to dinner in the executive lounge. It wasn't just a meal, it was an acknowledgement. The three of them sat overlooking the city, a view usually reserved for billionaires and board members. Rosa tried to hide her unease among the shining cutlery and soft music, but Jamal's excitement filled the room. "Sir," Rosa said softly, "I never thought I'd be sitting here. People like me usually just clean this place." Daniel smiled gently. "People like you hold it together." The words brought tears to her eyes. For once, someone powerful saw her worth. After dinner, Daniel led Jamal to the innovation lab again. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened a digital screen. It displayed the title, Morgantech Future Scholars Program. Jamal frowned. "What's this?" "It's something new," Daniel explained. "A scholarship I'm creating for kids who love technology but can't afford education. You'll be the first one." Jamal froze. "Me?" Daniel nodded. "Full sponsorship, your school, your college, and a spot at Morgantech when you graduate. You earned it." Rosa covered her mouth in disbelief. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Jamal stood speechless, his throat tight. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Just promise me one thing," Daniel said quietly. "Never lose that fire. The world will try to tell you where you belong, don't listen. You already proved that brilliance comes from anywhere." For a long moment, there was silence. Then Rosa whispered, "God bless you, sir." The next few months were like a dream. Morgantech's story went viral, CEO saved by janitor's son. The media spun it into a headline of hope and redemption. Interviews followed, and Jamal became an inspiration to millions. Daniel used every chance to speak not about technology, but about humanity. "Innovation," he said in one speech, "isn't about machines. It's about minds, and those minds can come from anywhere, any color, any street, any home." At the company, things changed too. Daniel restructured hiring practices, started outreach programs, and made education sponsorship a core part of Morgantech's legacy. The story of one boy had ignited a movement. But the most beautiful moment came one quiet evening a year later. Rosa was finishing her shift when Daniel walked into the lobby. He saw her polishing the same floor she always had. "Rosa," he said softly, "you shouldn't still be doing this. You've earned rest." She smiled. "This job gave my son his chance. I'll finish it properly." Daniel nodded, deeply moved. "Then let me make sure you're never forgotten." The next morning, a plaque appeared in the lobby. "In honor of Rosa Bennett, the heart that helped rebuild Morgantech." People stopped and stared at it. Some smiled, some teared up. Rosa touched it once, silently thanking the men who had changed her son's future. And Jamal, now in college, studying computer science on a full scholarship, often returned to visit Daniel. Every time he did, the CEO would smile and say, "Still coding, Jamal?" "Always, sir," the boy would reply. "There's still a lot to fix in the world." Daniel would nod. "Then keep going, son. The world needs more like you." As the screen faded to black, the narrator's voice would rise softly. 10 years had passed since that stormy night when Morgantech almost collapsed and was saved by a boy in an oversized hoodie. The world had changed, faster, brighter, more connected, but some stories never faded. The legend of the janitor's son who saved a billion-dollar company had long become a case study taught in universities, a symbol of how brilliance could rise from anywhere. Yet for those who lived it, Daniel, Rosa, and Jamal, it wasn't a legend. It was life. Daniel Morgan sat in his corner office once again, the skyline of New York glittering behind him. His hair had grayed at the temples, his eyes a little wearier, but his spirit had aged with grace. Under his leadership, Morgantech had grown beyond anything he once imagined. He had turned the company into a force for education and opportunity. The Future Scholars Program had funded over 10,000 students across the world, all inspired by one boy. And that boy was now a man. The elevator doors opened, and out stepped Jamal Bennett, 26 years old, sharp suit, calm stride, and a presence that drew eyes. He had graduated with honors in computer science, worked briefly at NASA, and returned home after Daniel's personal invitation. As he walked through the halls of Morgantech, employees turned their heads in quiet admiration. Some whispered his name. He paused at the same lobby where his mother's plaque still gleamed, in honor of Rosa Bennett, the heart that helped rebuild Morgantech. He smiled softly and touched the engraving. Rosa had retired a few years earlier, finally resting after a lifetime of work. But that plaque, shining under the morning light, reminded him of who he was and where he came from. Daniel rose from behind his desk when Jamal entered. "You made it," he said, his face lighting up. "I told you I'd be back one day," Jamal replied, grinning. They shook hands, though Daniel pulled him into a brief hug. "You have no idea how proud I am," the CEO said. Jamal's eyes sparkled. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. Everything I've done since, it's because you believed in me." Daniel smiled but said nothing. He turned toward the window, the skyline reflected in the glass. "Morgantech needs you again, Jamal." Jamal frowned. "What's wrong?" Daniel sighed and handed him a tablet. "Our system's been under attack for 3 days. It's sophisticated, too clean, too coordinated. Whoever's behind it isn't just trying to steal data. They're trying to destroy everything we've built." Jamal scrolled through the data logs, endless streams of numbers and codes flashing by. "This isn't random," he said quietly. "This is personal." Daniel nodded. "That's what I thought. Someone wants to tear down our reputation, maybe a rival, maybe someone inside." Jamal placed the tablet on the desk. "Let me see the server." Minutes later, they entered the high-security control room. It was bigger than it had been 10 years ago, walls of glowing servers, holographic projections, and AI-driven consoles. But the tension in the air was the same. Engineers moved nervously, speaking in low voices. When they saw Jamal, whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that him? The janitor's son? The one who saved Morgantech?" Jamal ignored them and went straight to the main terminal. He began typing rapidly, his eyes darting across the data streams. "Who's been accessing the firewall?" he asked. "Only the security team," one engineer said. "But they can't find the source." Jamal frowned. "That's because the source isn't outside. It's inside." Daniel's eyes widened. "An inside job?" "Not exactly," Jamal said slowly. "Someone's using our own update channels against us, slipping code into the system as if it's a routine patch." He turned to Daniel. "This kind of attack, it's someone who knows the architecture, the way I built it years ago when I helped redesign the system." Daniel looked at him sharply. "You think someone from your old team?" Jamal shook his head. "No. Someone who studied me. For hours, he worked without rest. Rosa called him during a break just to hear his voice. 'Baby, don't wear yourself out,' she said lovingly. 'You always carry the world like it's yours to fix.'" Jamal smiled softly. "It's worth carrying, Mama. You and Mr. Morgan made sure of that." By midnight, the company's fate once again balanced on the edge of a keystroke. Jamal isolated the malicious code, a digital parasite that had woven itself into the company's DNA. He stared at the screen, a mix of admiration and fear. "This isn't just a hacker," he murmured. "It's an AI." The room went silent. Daniel stepped forward. "You mean artificial intelligence?" "Yes," Jamal said. "An autonomous program. Someone created it to evolve, to learn from our defenses. Every time we fix something, it rewrites itself stronger." Brian, now older and humbler, swallowed hard. "So how do we stop it?" Jamal took a deep breath. "By teaching it something it doesn't understand, humanity." The others looked confused, but Daniel understood. "You mean emotion? Empathy?" Jamal nodded. "AI runs on logic. But it can't predict compassion. I built a backup protocol years ago, something inspired by my mom." He opened a small encrypted file titled Rosa. Inside was a handwritten code fragment, one he'd written as a teenager. It was designed not for security, but for mercy, an override that responded to compassion-based triggers rather than binary logic. He'd once joked that if machines ever learned to feel, this code would teach them kindness. Now it was their last hope. He uploaded the sequence, and the system began to pulse with light. The AI resisted, rewriting itself faster. The screens glowed crimson. Engineers shouted warnings. Daniel grabbed Jamal's shoulder. "It's too dangerous." Jamal didn't stop. "It's learning faster, but it's afraid. That means it's close to breaking." Suddenly, the lights dimmed. Then, one by one, the screens turned white. The AI's core sequence appeared on the main display, and then froze. The words appeared. "Error, emotional conflict, compassion detected." Then everything went dark. Seconds later, the Morgantech logo reappeared. "Systems online. Servers stable. Attack neutralized." The room exploded with applause and relief. Daniel exhaled shakily, pride welling in his chest. He turned to Jamal. "You did it again." Jamal smiled faintly. "No, sir. We did it, me, you, and Mom." Daniel chuckled, eyes misty. "Your mother's heart saved this company twice." As dawn broke, the city lights faded into gold. Jamal stood by the window, just as Daniel once had, looking over the skyline. The reflection staring back at him wasn't a boy in a hoodie anymore. It was a man, a leader, a symbol of what faith and opportunity could build. Daniel joined him. "You know," he said softly, "you could run this company someday." Jamal smiled. "Maybe. But first, I want to teach. Kids like me, the ones no one looks at twice, they deserve a chance too." Daniel nodded. "Then you'll have my full support. Always." As the sun rose higher, the camera would pan over the Morgantech Tower, the company logo gleaming against the sky, a monument not just to technology, but to humanity. 5 years after the second Morgantech miracle, the world had changed again. Technology had leapt forward in ways no one could have imagined, and the line between human emotion and machine intelligence had grown ever thinner. Yet in one corner of the world, a young man named Jamal Bennett was quietly shaping that future with the same mix of logic and compassion that once saved a company and a generation of dreamers. The morning light filtered through the glass walls of a new building that carried a simple sign, the Rosa Foundation for Technology and Humanity. Inside, students of every background filled the rooms, children who had never owned computers before, teenagers from underfunded schools, and young adults whose ideas burned brighter than their opportunities. At the center of it all stood Jamal, no longer the nervous boy from the server room but a confident teacher whose eyes still held the warmth of humility. He looked over the sea of faces and said, "When I was your age, I thought coding was just about machines. Then I realized it's about understanding people. Every line you write either builds bridges or walls. Choose to build bridges." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the students began to smile. They understood. They were part of something bigger than themselves. Daniel Morgan, now semi-retired, watched from the back of the auditorium with quiet pride. He had stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to a new generation, but he never missed an opening at the Rosa Foundation. He saw in Jamal the same fire he'd once had, but tempered by empathy, something Daniel had learned from him and his mother. After the session, Daniel approached the stage. Jamal greeted him with a grin. "Did I do okay?" "You did better than okay," Daniel said. "You reminded them, and me, that the best systems start with heart." Jamal laughed softly. "You're sounding poetic these days." "Retirement does that," Daniel replied with a wink. Then his expression turned thoughtful. "Rosa would be proud of you." Jamal's smile softened. "She already was, Mr. Morgan. Before she passed, she told me to keep teaching kindness through code. She said people forget that technology should serve humanity, not replace it." Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. "She was right. She always was." The two men walked together through the foundation halls. On one wall hung photographs of students who had graduated and gone on to create startups, social projects, and community labs around the world. Under the pictures, a plaque read, "One spark can light 1,000 screens." As they walked, a student ran up, a small girl no older than 10, clutching a broken tablet. "Mr. Jamal." It stopped working again. Jamal knelt down. "Let's see what happened." He opened the case, adjusted a tiny circuit, and smiled as the screen flickered back to life. There. You just needed a little patience and a soft touch. The girl's face lit up. Thank you. Daniel chuckled. You've become your mother. Jamal looked up at him. That's the plan. Later. 10 out of 10 that evening, Jamal returned to his office. The city lights shimmered outside the window just as they once had from Daniel's office years ago. He sat quietly, scrolling through the Foundation's online platform, thousands of messages from kids around the world sending in their ideas, inventions, and dreams. One message caught his eye. Dear Mr. Bennett, my mom works as a cleaner at a tech company. I want to learn computers like you so I can help her. How do I start? Jamal smiled gently. He typed back. Start where you are. Curiosity is the first code. Kindness is the second. The rest will come. He hit send and leaned back in his chair. Outside, thunder rumbled, another storm over the city, much like the one that had started his story so long ago. He thought of Rosa, her laughter, her faith, her quiet strength. He thought of Daniel, who had believed when logic said not to. And he thought of the generations that would follow, kids who might one day sit where he sat, facing impossible problems with nothing but courage and compassion. Daniel entered the room quietly. Working late again. Jamal smiled. Some things never change. Daniel looked around at the rows of glowing monitors showing students' projects. This place, it's bigger than any company I ever built. It's not mine, Jamal said. It's hers. It's theirs. Daniel nodded slowly. You know, when I lost hope all those years ago, I thought my story was ending. Turns out it was just the beginning of yours. Jamal looked at him, then at the storm outside. Maybe stories don't end, he said softly. They just pass hands, like code between systems, until someone writes the next line. Daniel smiled, eyes bright. Then keep writing, Jamal. The world's still debugging itself. They both laughed quietly, the sound echoing through the office as lightning flashed across the sky. The storm didn't frighten them anymore. It reminded them how far they'd come, from the night everything went dark to the day they learned light can come from anywhere. The scene faded on Jamal standing by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Behind him glowed the Foundation's emblem, an open hand holding a small flame, beneath which were the words. Knowledge with kindness. He was once a boy who saved a system, then a man who taught the world that hope is the real power source. We all have storms to face, but sometimes the smallest act of kindness can reboot a life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, courage, and second chances.